first meeting, and it's good to see all your smiling faces except Ken's. Now he's smiling.
It's March 31st, isn't it?
No. Is it?
Yes.
Yes,
I
it
thought it
is.
was April 1st. Okay, never mind. Go ahead, Gary.
Commissioners, it is Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. This is your issues today. We'll start with roll call. Chair Bernard,
Here.
Commissioner Fischer,
Here.
Commissioner Schrader,
Here.
Commissioner Humberston,
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Great. We'll start, as we always do, with a coronavirus update. I'll ask Nancy Bush, our Director of Disaster Management, and the Incident Commander for the Emergency Operations Center to please start.
All right. Good morning, everyone. First, I do want to say thank you again for all of your support and everything you're doing to help us out here in the EC, as well as everyone here in the county. Again, I will start out with some of the numbers. These numbers are from yesterday morning. They have not posted any new numbers today yet. So the state has 606 positive. 40 of those are in Clackamas County. The state has 12,277 negatives and 1,048 here in Clackamas. Statewide, there are 16 deaths, and here in Clackamas, there are 3. And hospitalized statewide is 606. So I also, before I go into too much of what's going on here in the EOC, there was a presidential declaration for the state of Oregon, which happened over the weekend. So that triggers a few things. There's not automatic money that comes with that, because what we're dealing with is money for FEMA and for a public assistance application. So I'm working with finance here to get our application in, and we're going to have to do an estimate for what we think we may spend throughout the event. So that, as you can imagine, is a little difficult to do. So we're trying to make sure we get all of the information we can from the other departments to get that done. I also have to send that out to all of our partners because any public agency can turn that in. So I'm having a call every Tuesday, Thursday with the cities. So we've got the information out to them, public works, schools, fire stations. It goes out to all of those. And then they submit theirs directly to the state. So everything doesn't have to go direct through the county like it usually does, which is very helpful for us. So those things are moving pretty quickly at this time. I also want to let everyone know that we're being safe here in the EOC, and we do have some members of the EOC that are now virtual. They are able to work from home, so if you do visit the EOC, please let me know first, but you will see us spread out quite a bit as we work through this event. Also, we have been, I wanted to talk a little bit about alternative care sites and housing for vulnerable populations, because I think that those are getting confused. Alternative care sites are really hospital sites. So if the hospital is full, we would be planning with the hospitals, hopefully, to open up another site where they would send people because they can't get them into the hospital. So we're working with the state to try to get more guidance. There's been some confusion from the state from what they're expecting from the counties, what they want the counties to do, or even what they want the hospitals to do. So we're working through that. But that is a site where actually healthcare does take place. We are also working on housing for vulnerable populations. So if we have a vulnerable population, for example, and they may need to be quarantined because they're showing symptoms, we have a voucher system where we're able to put them in a hotel for 14 days to see if they need to be tested or if, so those are two different things that we're working on. So I want to make sure everyone understands those differences. We are looking for the alternative care sites or just call it a alternative hospital type site situation. We're working in the region to identify those. We have looked at some sites here in Clackamas County. There have been no decisions made at this time and what they will look like.
Nancy?
Yes.
want to interrupt you a second. It's not really our responsibility to have the alternative care sites, correct?
It really is there's some clarification. So it's the responsibility primarily of the hospital, but they have to work through the counties, and in our case, the region, to identify those sites and get them set up. And part
Okay.
of the issues, of course, is how do we staff that if the hospital is already overwhelmed? But some of that responsibility does belong to the counties, depending on how things are going to get rolled out by OHA.
Okay, so still a lot of confusion.
There,
Yeah, okay.
there is, and again, we're trying to get all of that identified and defined by OHA. But we do have some responsibility in helping to find the site and helping to get the site set up. Are there other questions about that in particular?
Yes. So on that, do we have a list that we can talk about
For potential sites?
for sites?
So we have a couple of, in the region, we're looking at some of the larger, some of this I'm not sure we're comfortable talking about publicly yet, because there's a lot of things in the background that we have to do before we say that, yeah, this site is a potential.
Okay. The reason I ask is that late last week, I had requested a list of some sites that are being considered, and just watching some of the news and what's going on in different counties around the West Coast, including Washington State, a lot of the sites they're looking at are pretty large as far as scale. So, and they're relatively, at least what I'm seeing, pretty decent sites as far as size and as far as some of the amenities, but I don't know what that criteria is. I would certainly like to volley up some ideas for just that. And if doing that offline is better, then let's do that. But I would certainly like to see a list, because I want to make sure they're all included. Gary, when I talked to Gary last evening, he had a great idea for a site. And I think one criteria ought to be, logically, that they be as near to a hospital, an existing hospital, as possible. I think I kind of mentioned that last week. So I can think of probably 3 sites that are nearby hospital facilities, if not on the hospital grounds themselves.
And that is correct. I mean, and with the sites we are looking at are close to the hospitals and in the region, also here in the county too, the ones we're looking at here. Because our hospital system is regional, we want to make sure that we are working with them to solidify some sites to look at and to consider. And we can have some other conversations about that, definitely.
All right.
So
Chair.
can I at least get a list today of what is being looked at? Is that possible?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Chair, you have Commissioner Fischer and then Commissioner Humberston.
Okay.
Hey, Nancy, I'm curious what would happen if the hotels and motels close, what we would do for vulnerable populations in that situation, looking ahead at that.
So yeah, we've done some planning on that, and I actually have talked to Administrator Schmidt about that too. It's like, so, you know, would we lease a hotel? We would have to staff it if we did that. But we are having those conversations if we need to do such things.
Ken, you're on mute though.
So I'm a little concerned about trying to set up, I don't know, call it tent cities or whatever you want, that aren't on the hospital grounds. Logistically speaking, I think would be very difficult to manage, quite frankly. So I personally think the high priority ought to be parking lots at hospital grounds where staff in the hospitals are going to be able to move back and forth between the hospital and the outside facilities without having to drive someplace or otherwise get involved with the general public. It's great. It's a great idea that the mall said we could use their parking lot, but then how do you logistically supply that? And we already know, staffing wise and material wise, we're behind the curve as far as being able to supply the needs right now. So I just don't want to see us get out ahead of our skis and have 15 different sites when the reality is it's going to be very difficult logistically to manage them.
So Commissioner, we totally agree with you. And those are the conversations that we are having right now to make sure that we have the site in the right place for the right number of people. One of the things we learned from New York, and they said that they had wished they had done this much earlier than what they did. And so we are trying to get ahead of that, and we're trying to work with we are working with the hospitals to problem solve those issues.
Thank you, Nancy.
Okay. Just a couple more things. I just wanted to mention too that we do have the voucher system. When I was talking about, placing the vulnerable populations in hotels with that particular system, we have been able to place all of those that have a voucher who need a place to stay. We had one person that was denied at one hotel. However, we had him transported to another. So we have housed everyone in the vulnerable population that has come through the EOC that has needed a voucher. So I want to be sure that everyone understands that and knows that as well.
Okay. Chair, look like Commissioner Fischer had a comment.
Okay.
Hey, Nancy, I'm curious about, I'm not sure if you saw about Unity and the crisis that they're experiencing there for people with mental health in psychosis or other challenging situations, difficulty with social distancing in those facilities, and with what we can anticipate with more aggravated mental health issues with this self-isolation. Do we have plans to deal with this issue? I'm just curious what is being talked about.
Yeah, so actually, Rich and I had a conversation this morning. So we're going to be adding a mental health or behavioral health component to the EOC to start planning for those and doing some prioritization and making sure that we can start anticipating the issues and dealing with those as possible. I don't know if Rich, if you want to add anything to that or not.
Rich?
Sure. So I've already talked with Mary Rumbaugh about this to get an update. Our mental health staff are doing a nice job of keeping up with the current flow. We do anticipate at some point that we will need to bring other resources into this because we anticipate if we don't, we won't be able to. We have gotten permission from the state. They are being extremely flexible in terms of our current community mental health grant and in terms of the use of dollars. We are looking at probably getting usually we get 1/12, as we go through the year. They're looking at giving us 3 months of funding right up front here within the next month to bring additional dollars to bear. But I think we anticipate that we're going to have some struggles. We're going to have some struggles regarding residential care. If we start having residential facility operators becoming sick, what are we going to do? I know that Washington County has actually, they have requisitioned and have a contract regarding a Comfort Inn in Washington County that they have looked at staffing up. And so, we may end up pursuing a similar model. I know that the region has looked at activating what are they calling it? Their sort of cadre of medical volunteers. So we're going to be, there's a lot in the work in response to this because part of the pandemic, you have the physical health pandemic, but we're also anticipating a behavioral health pandemic as well that will sort of lag behind what's happening in physical health. So I think we're doing pretty well right now, but we do anticipate we're having an extensive need for additional resource.
So Rich was talking about the Medical Reserve Corps, which does have staff that are medical as well as psychologists can also be a part of the Medical Reserve Corps, and that has grown. They have to register with the state because actually their liability is covered with the state, but that is something we definitely are looking into to help with some of these issues. It's a little bit trickier with that particular group, but it's a resource that we are aware of and that we're working with.
Nancy, you might mention if there are damages in a room, that there's something tied to the voucher that would help repair? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so the voucher system, we actually do have a contract with Do Good for the voucher system. So they do have like an insurance or a way to cover if there's damage in the rooms, and to work with the hotels and as well as the client through issues that may come up. And we are also making sure the vouchers do not cover meals. So through social services as well, we're making sure that the individuals that are being quarantined are also getting meals, but that is not part of the voucher system.
Okay. Chair Bernard, Commissioner Savas.
Paul?
Yeah, I want to add that, do we have, I didn't know if TS or someone had some, or how they do that, but if there's some extra, let's say iPads, for example, or laptops that are not in use that can be used for teleconferencing, because I do know that a lot of doctors' offices, especially psychiatrists and all those, are converting to telecare. And so that should actually alleviate some of the travel time and things like that for everyone. But of course, the patient on the other end needs to have that kind of device in front of them. So I didn't know how easy or not that would be. Make sure their residence has internet access and so on. So I didn't know if that just added another layer of complication, and that's been anticipated.
I know that we're struggling to get technology for our own people, so it's probably out there a ways. But that's a good point, Paul. Thanks.
Okay, that is the end of my update unless there are more questions.
Do not see any additional questions.
Okay, Gary?
Right, thank you, Nancy and Rich. Next, commissioners would like to discuss with you the potential of extending the temporary public closure of Clackamas County buildings to the public and encouraging employees to continue to work remotely as best they can, only to have employees physically on campus if their job can only be performed on campus. Right now, you first made this decision effective March. That is in effect through April 5th. I'm recommending you extend this until April 20th, but seeking your direction today if you agree to that action.
Gary, I just want to add that we thought we'd just do 2-week intervals and see where we're at. It's most likely we're going to have to go to the end of the month, if not further. But for now, we thought we'd just extend it 2 weeks.
Correct.
Ken?
Yeah, given the recent extension by the administration to April 30th, any reason not to go to April 30th? We can always rescind if we choose.
Well, Oregon's, I mean, I think we're doing better than a lot of other places. So what works in one county doesn't necessarily work in the other.
So
But,
you're asking for 2 weeks?
yes.
I'll move for 2 weeks.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second to extend the period another 2 weeks. Any further discussion? Please poll us.
Okay, Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Humberston,
Aye.
Commissioner Fischer,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Chair Bernard.
Aye. I think Stephen would like to say that we're not supposed to be voting during policy sessions, but this is probably a special case.
No, that's fine. So
Okay.
just for clarity though, 2 weeks, are we taking it to the 14th of April or are we taking it to April 20th?
20th.
And so how is that 2 weeks?
Because the convention ends April 5th, which is next week. So 2 weeks.
Okay, okay. So we're just taking it to the 20th then?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Obviously, this is changing on a day-by-day basis. In touch with you before that date if you choose to extend it beyond that date. I do want to say the county is still open for business, but it's virtual business. Where practical, we will be able to serve the public physically, appropriate social distancing impacts so that we are maintaining the safety of our employees and the public. But we may be able to do limited work by appointment only with the public. Individual departments will determine that. I'll share that with you. But I really want to share that for the public, the county is still operating to provide you the public services you expect. So we will continue to do that here as an organization. Thank you, commissioners, for that guidance. I will communicate that to employees later this morning, and we'll make sure the public is aware also. Next, commissioners, I did email you about 40 minutes ago. There is a contract that Health, Housing, and Human Services is requesting an emergency, under the emergency declaration, an immediate signature. Because this was right before issues, it's not been signed yet, but I did email it to you and ask for your approval now for this contract signature. Rich Swift is on the call here to give a quick background. It is for Oregon Project Independence, funding in-home care services. Rich, can you give a real quick background of what this contract will do?
Sure. So we're asking permission to push an additional $7,500 to Affordable Care Northwest. They're providing backup for our Oregon Project Independence in-home care workers in case some of them become ill and can no longer provide that care. Is actually installing a backup format for us to be able to continue our work in Oregon Project Independence.
Is it even,
That's it in brief.
is it even necessary to ask us for $7,500?
It's probably not, but you know, it's since we're here talking about it, and I pushed it to Gary this morning, courtesy.
I have a question.
Martha?
Yes. So Rich, how many folks are we serving right now with OPI?
You know, Martha, I don't have, that's a good question. I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
My guess is
Okay.
it's, you know, probably within a framework of about 100 individuals or so, but I can certainly push that information.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion on this or not?
Well, might as well.
Okay, well, I had a chance to read it, so I'm okay with it, so I'll move to approve.
Second.
Been moved and Seconded. Kevin, will you please poll us?
Yes, it will. Commissioner Humberston,
Aye.
Commissioner Fischer,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Chair Bernard.
Aye. Thank you, Richard, for your great work.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, so commissioners, that is our updates on COVID-19. Are there any further questions for either myself, Nancy Bush, or Rich Swift?
Yeah, Gary, I
Tanya?
have a question. I think this is mostly a Rich question. I was talking with Deborah Mason today, who says the Customer Service Center cannot meet capacity because of their space, basically. They can only have so many people in their space. So I understand that we are having an additional food site in Milwaukee. One thing that Deborah mentioned to me is that they're getting many new calls to the Clackamas Service Center from Washington and Multnomah County. So many food resources have shut down and there are such limited resources. I'm just curious what we are doing regionally to look at this issue of food insecurity.
So I can tell you what we're doing locally. So Brennan Durbin and I have been talking about how do we and how could we use our existing workforce to begin delivering food, because this is becoming an increasing issue. We haven't had conversations regionally about how we would backfill this at this point. We would probably need to use the EOC to begin those conversations, but we are becoming increasingly concerned regarding access to food for a part of our population. So you're going to probably be hearing more. You'll probably be hearing more about this as this event unfolds.
All right, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Savas, and then Nancy Bush,
Martha,
Yeah,
and
so-
then Martha.
and then
Yeah,
Mark.
so
Should I be pressing some button or something up here? I don't know.
To do
Never
what?
mind. To
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
okay, so question on this one. Obviously, whatever additional sites there are, they need to be staffed. So I don't know if the Clackamas Service Center has the staffing capacity, let alone all the other facilities that it takes to do what they do over there. But when we last did the homeless count, point in time count, and of course, I think a lot of us know that, who've ever been out there, that it's very, very close to the Multnomah County line. So there's a lot of Multnomah County people that walk in off the Springwater Trail to the Clackamas Service Center. So at some point, at least there, if there is an overload there, I think we ought to be working with maybe Multnomah County to some degree to take some of that, because when we were there doing the point in time, we had a Multnomah County team doing point in time and the Clackamas County team doing point in time at the Clackamas Service Center. And they were busier than I was. I'll just say that. So I do know that, you know, one of the questions was, where did you spend the last night? And then we had to determine if they did that in Clackamas County or Multnomah County. So just bear in mind, it's just the proximity issue. And maybe there's, we don't want to have these people have to move a great distance from where they are today. So it seems like doing something locally and meeting that need locally would be the appropriate thing, or at least a consideration.
So Kevin, you're taking notes, right?
Yes.
So this might be something that you would have myself talk to Deborah about on Wednesday.
Deborah
So-
Mason?
No, Deborah Kafori.
Okay, yes.
So who was next?
It was Nancy Bush and then Martha.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple of things. Yeah, we're working on the food insecurity. So we're working with the food bank and with social services. And as a matter of fact, there's a call going on right now talking about how do we work some of the issues out around that. We're hearing that there's also food security, insecurity around Colton, Moala, Malino, and that area. So we're working to have the Milwaukee Center be a place where they can put the food boxes together. We'll have one county staff there to help with that operation. And then the food bank is helping pull the staff together that will come put the food boxes together and do deliveries. So there's some, you know, yeah, there's just, we're getting all of that in place right now. I do agree we need to take a look at, you know, what is going along the Springwater Trail and having that conversation with Multnomah County and even maybe some with Washington County as well to try to get some of that worked out. So I will put that on the list to bring to the table about food insecurity.
You know, you could probably add, Ken and I could take food out. I mean, if we have boxes, we could load them up and take them out to Colton or wherever.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, add me to that list if you like, if there's a need.
No, I'd be glad to deliver too. I don't have that was one of the things I was going to mention. That doesn't bother me, particularly in the rural areas, because I'm really worried about how they're managing things. In any case, so I think, Nancy, you answered my question. So food banks are still open and they're still acquiring food. And is Meals on Wheels still operating?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
they are. And I will
Okay.
say too that the reason why that we're having some food insecurities in some of these more rural areas is because their food pantries have closed down because they just didn't have the food, which is why we're trying
Right.
to work.
Okay. Well, let's organize that and get something going. So, okay.
Was somebody else next?
That was it.
All right, thank you. Gary?
All right. So then moving on to the next topic is from Commissioner Schrader, an update on the Construction Career Pathways Project C2P2.
You're muted, Martha.
Okay. All right. I'm unmuted. I never know when I'm muted or not at this point. Our workforce board had a meeting with the Metro staff about their C2P2 framework, and I think we're ready to go to a work session, so that's all I wanted to let you know. Our workforce board is becoming more involved in it, which is what our goal was. So,
Great report.
okay, that's it.
Thank you.
Simple. Easy peasy, work session. Okay.
Schedule-
Gary, you're cutting out.
Right, sorry, we'll schedule a work session with the board.
Yeah.
Next is review of your business meeting agenda for this Thursday, April 2nd, 2020. You have consent agenda only. There are no controversial topics. However, if you have any questions, would you please let me know? You'll also have a COVID-19 update. With that, we're ready for commissioner communications. Commissioners, we have been testing to have liaison updates during your commissioner communications, but basically there are no liaison updates because most of this business is not being conducted right now. So I'm happy to put a pause on the liaison updates for a few weeks. So unless you want to, we can skip the topics I've listed on your agenda, and instead you can just give general updates of what you'd like to discuss.
Let's do that. So who's up first? Who wants to raise? Oh, Paul, you ready?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go
Okay.
ahead and just, Jim probably knows most of this, but on the transportation, I guess there's a potential for federal funding for a project ready to go to kick off economically, to keep the economic engine going, a stimulus program. So they're looking for a shovel-ready project. And I think the most shovel-ready project we know of in the region, let alone the county, is probably I-205. So we discussed that on Monday, or yesterday, and so we're hoping that that would be something that we could, if again there's something that comes from down to the federal government, we can apply for. I don't know what's going to happen with the tolling discussion at our Region 1 Act executive meeting we had late last week. We discussed how we canceled our April meeting, but there is a lot of interest apparently from OTC and ODOT to continue forward with the tolling outreach. But under these times and these circumstances, that'll be very difficult to accomplish. So just want to give you a heads up that whether it's us as Clackamas County or us as the region, there will probably be some activity, it looks like. Just don't know what it's going to be as of yet. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Paul. Who's next? How about Martha?
Well, I've basically been given me an opportunity to plow through the tome that we have with our housing report. So my goal is to read the whole thing, which is a pretty daunting task. It's quite the volume. MPAC has been on hold, so we haven't had any discussions lately on anything to do with land use. I have been looking through USDA websites for our rural areas to see what money is available for relief, housing, and those kinds of things. And there actually seems to be quite a bit there. So I've just been making a list and compiling those kinds of links in the hopes that we can get that out to our rural areas at some point.
Okay,
Okay.
Ken?
Just one thing, and it's tied into Commissioner Savas's report on transportation, and that is the Bull Run Bridge and the application with the federal government for, I think it's either $9 or $11 million, along with our $2 million to get that done. My concern on that is that if the state comes in and puts a weight limit on that bridge, it's really going to cause havoc up there. So I just want to make sure that in spite of the COVID-19 situation that we are dealing with, that that process is going forward, and fingers crossed that we get that grant and get that bridge replaced before it becomes a real problem up there.
Thank you, Ken. Tanya? There
Thank
go.
you, Mr. Chair. So a lot of what I've been working on is probably evident in my questions to Nancy, but I have continued to connect with service providers and looking at our safety net. Jim, I know you've done a really good, because I've seen it in the notes, talking about our concern about increased domestic violence.
Yeah.
So that is a real concern. Could probably use everyone's support in the advocacy and the special session that's going to be coming up. The district attorneys are going to be submitting a bill to fix some of the issues that are raised during this time because of the court situation, and asking for certain timeline extensions, and making sure that if we relax some of the taking people to jail because we want to keep people out of jail, we don't do that for certain domestic violence crimes. Clackamas Women's Services is able to meet the need of getting people vouchered into hotels. But like Nancy said, and she talked about if hotels, what is going to be our response, thinking right now ahead to that is really, really important. And so I'm really glad that we're doing that. The other issue, although we're not talking about the children's levy, there's tremendous concern about what this self-isolation is doing to children. So much of our natural safety net is children going to school, children going to the hair salon, children going out to church or to different places for other eyes to be on the health and welfare of children. So we don't have that right now. It's very much of a concern. Could really use all of your best thinking on what our role is, what can we do to help facilitate safety for our children. Probably there isn't a time more important than ever that highlights that issue and that concern. The other thing that I've done is I've pretty much basically planted myself, given that I am on the west side and I am very much in a line with what's happening through the Westland City Council, the school boards and school districts here on the west side. I participated by listening to Lake Oswego City Council meeting yesterday. I'm really trying to geographically connect myself during this situation, and I think it might be helpful since we already, all of us have natural geographical areas where we have most of a base, if we could report back on what's happening throughout the county. And Ken, the one thing I was hoping we could, you would have expertise on and could share with us, because I know this is a really important issue, but I don't know where it is right now, is as far as internet access and what's happening in some of those areas where we were trying to get more access. What's happening in those communities? Is there something we need to be doing more quickly regarding internet access? So those are the things that are on my mind. I'm really trying to structure myself and focus on the things where my expertise is, and to bring that back to the commission. And I really appreciate, it seems like everybody is doing that right now, which is great. So the more we can do that, I think the more we'll all be supported.
Go ahead, Ken.
So on the internet access question, staff are working on a project and what's known as the Kiwanis Project in partnership with Sandy at this point in time, which will give better service to that small community up there. I have a sketch of, I actually have a business plan to be presented to the board when the time is right. And unfortunately, we're kind of busy with this stuff right now. But still want to move forward with that project. But this is a perfect example of why we need high-speed internet everywhere in the county, either in partnership with the companies or doing it ourselves as we can afford to do it, because there are people in the rural areas that internet service is so slow that they can't participate in any of what we're doing right now. And in some places, they don't have any at all. So, we are moving forward on it. I'm looking forward to bringing the actual business plan forward to the board in the near future. Gary will schedule it when he feels the time is right as far as working it into our work schedule. But of course, COVID-19 is our primary project right now.
All right, Chair Bernard, you have Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner Fischer.
Wow.
Yeah, I just want to build on that. We obviously all know that it's one of our top priorities is getting internet access out to the rural areas, and to Martha's efforts and Ken's efforts, and and collectively, I continually think about that virtually every day when I realize that all of this, whether it's telecare or commuting or working out of your office, that people who don't have adequate connections, adequate internet service. I'm not here to define what speed it is per se, but it's now more important than ever. So those people are basically stranded at home and very little connection. So we've got to figure out a way. And I don't know what other devices, whether it can be by cell with a cell device or whatnot that people can connect. But I do know that it's a challenge for people. We've heard that. I've heard that for the last 10, 12 years as a commissioner. So good point.
Thank you, Paul. And then Sonia and maybe Martha after that.
Yeah, so I'm just piggybacking on what Paul said. I really agree with everything he did. And so Ken, or Gary, if there's a way that we can move more quickly on this. I know that before this pandemic, I was very much an advocate to make sure we have everything in place, a good business plan, good strategies, very flexible. I don't doubt that even in haste, because I've seen it through this pandemic, that we are being very strategic and very thoughtful, maybe more so and more nimble and more effective than we are usually. So this is the stuff that keeps me up at night. Just like Paul was saying, people in the rural community are outside, up close around the mountain in the sandy area that don't have access. And what are they going to do? How are they going to do those appointments? I think this kind of needs to be, if we can, you have to prioritize, of course, and be strategic. But if we could up the importance of this, I would be really in favor of that.
Well, I think that our folks in Washington, D.C. should be reminded that this is a priority. I know we've been asked to pick one project, infrastructure project, which is 205, but this is as important an infrastructure project, well, almost as important. So I'm sure Gary will make sure that's heard.
So
Martha?
Martha or Ken?
No,
You want
Martha, then Ken.
Okay. This just came over my line and I thought I'd share it. Basically, the Oregon China Council, Ken, this is for you, buddy. Evidently, they've been able to get FDA approved surgical masks.
Oh, great.
They're going to arrive in New York, and New York will get some, and then they're going to take what's available to Oregon, and they're going to be able to, the council will facilitate transportation of the surgical masks from New York to Oregon, and the contact, and so we should let Nancy know about this. Brad Cunningham, Office of Emergency Management, basically. So the Oregon China Council has come through with some FDA certified masks. I talked to Robin last night on the phone. There was some issue with the state as to whether or not they were FDA certified, and apparently that's been worked out. So thanks, Ken. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we were just talking about that yesterday. That's good news.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I'll forward the numbers to Nancy. So okay, all right.
Really cutting out there. Anything else? Stephen, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Just real quick, the Supreme Court issued a revised order a couple days ago with a level 3 restrictions, and the court is basically suspending trials, non-essential trials, until June 20th. And they're restricting a lot of face-to-face court interaction as well. So the state courts are looking at a June 20th timeframe, which is pretty significant beyond our April 20th timeframe. So that's going to curtail a lot of court functions and a lot of court processing. And secondly is we're still working on coming up with additional emergency measures for the board to consider. So far we have 3. I'm hoping to get it to you maybe on Thursday, but I want to make sure we get a comprehensive one. 2 involve our jail with the capacity management plan and allowing for early release based on the sheriff's discretion. And the 3rd allows for continuity of garbage collection and recycling service in the event of non-payment and throughout unincorporated Clackamas County. So there's 3 of them. I sent out to all of our EMT folks to get their additional input, and I'm going to wait for that to conclude before we complete the package to the board. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
Chair, you had Commissioner Humberston.
Yeah.
Two things. Backing up to the ISP discussion and the comments by Commissioner Fischer. Once we actually have one, even if it is a pilot basis program, we become eligible for federal grant monies to get the program up and running even quicker. So in terms of the objectives that we've been talking about, once we actually have one, we become eligible for those grants, and that could help us move the ball a lot quicker. And instead of just doing it with our own cash on the barrelhead kind of approach. And we don't have to incur debt doing it that way. The other thing is I wanted to give kudos to the Sheriff's Department, particularly at the jail. The protocols that they have put in place for entry and exit from the facility to protect the population in the jail are the protocols that have been adopted by just about every Sheriff's Department in the state. So got to give the credit where it is due, that it was their protocols that became the model for a good portion of the state Sheriff's Department's jails.
Great. Anybody else?
Commissioner Fischer looks like has the question.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm just wondering if there's a way we could systemize hearing from the sheriff, hearing from the district attorney, and possibly our clerk as far as election go as we go through this. Maybe not every week, but systematically.
Did you want Stephen to answer that?
Well, I think anyone could answer it. Or what do you guys think? Do you think that's a good idea?
Say it again.
To have the sheriff come join in one of our Zoom meetings and the district attorney, just so we can get a sense of what's happening in our other sectors.
That'd be great.
We heard from the clerk earlier, but there might be other updates that we should know about in regards to the election that's coming up.
Yeah, one thing is that the clerk is, I guess there are a bunch of volunteers. They have a short training they have to go through. They won't let me go there. I don't understand. Sonia, Ken, and I have volunteered to take a whole shift. My pencil is sharpened. Anyway, what else?
I had that
Gary?
happen to me, Jen.
Yes, I know. Gary?
Yes, we can arrange having the other electeds join you on Tuesdays, commissioners. We will. That.
Okay, great.
Just a quick reminder, commissioners, you will be doing listening sessions with the public starting today, March 31st, and then this Thursday, April 2nd, on various topics where you will be able to connect with the public via Zoom and hear their input. So you can brief the public on how those are going this Thursday and next Tuesday. That is the end of your issues for today. There are no policy sessions today. Your next business will be on Thursday at the business meeting.
All right, so it's my turn.
Yes.
So we are, one thing, Lynn Peterson called me about what Paul mentioned. There could be some stimulus money, which could possibly even pay for the South Corridor, even though I don't know how that would work because it's not designed. And the whole idea behind stimulus money is to have projects ready to go. But it is possible that it could pay that $1 billion or a much larger portion of that. I don't know. They're going to decide in August whether to move forward. I think it's probably a mistake right now to add additional burden to the taxpayers, but that's not my decision, that's theirs. I also said that if that's true and $1 billion taken off the package and we can, and the package remains the same, I'm gonna fight like hell for the Sunrise project. And I will need all your help, especially Paul, since he's more connected than the rest of us. We are talking with the commissioners. We're now going to just talk Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays because we're, I would say we've talked a lot of subjects and we're working those down to some pretty finite things that Nancy talked about and Stephen talked about a little bit, and I think we're really doing well coordinating. I have got a message from somebody that they wondered if the county was going to help businesses, and my response is we're not like Portland. We don't have income tax. We survive strictly on property taxes. We get 18 cents out of every dollar, and more than half of that goes to the sheriff's department and human services and other things. So we just don't have the ability to support that. But I did mention the federal government is coming up with SBA loans or grants. So there's opportunities there. And there are also other opportunities, I'm sure, but we're not Portland. We can't possibly help fund businesses, even though it'd be nice to have $3 million set aside for grants for businesses. Also talked to Gary a little bit. You know, earlier when we were talking about the budget, I suggested maybe that the grant program should go away. I would say the grant program right now is probably one of the most valuable things we do. So we got to consider that when we go through the budget process. And as you know, there's a legislative concept being considered to relax some of our community, I guess, what is that?
Public meeting laws, Mr. Chair?
There you go. Thank you. And before you leave, I need to, never mind. I figured out how to spell it. Anyway, and there's a big list of things on there that one has to do with extending our budget period. However, I think that this works pretty good. We may be able to have some meetings and do it using Zoom. But Gary, I'm sure we'll figure that out. As far as the employees, we have budget till the end of the year and end of June. So whether or not we can continue paying everybody after that is something we're going to have to consider. There are probably employees that could make more money on unemployment, frankly. I don't know who those are or if that's true at all, but that is certainly not a road we want to go down. Gary is working really closely with, we've gotten a few letters from various departments that were not comfortable with the way they were being designated as crucial employees, and Gary is working through those with EA, the Employee Association, and with AFSCME. But generally, I think that one thing I've heard is that people really trust us and really trust Gary to get it right. And his messages to the employees have been well taken, and we just really, a lot of our problems with our electeds, their departments, and they're trying different things like staggering work hours. Some departments still haven't got kind of the spacing idea up. And if you've been to EOC and you've seen how much they've spread out, they're just doing a fantastic job. But you can look next door and see 4 people sitting nearby one another answering the phone. Something's wrong with that. So we're working through those issues, and we'll have those resolved by this week. If not, according to Stephen, I have the power to do something about it, and if I have to, I will, with our elected officials. I think the Sheriff's Department appears to be doing great. Elections is doing better. I know that Juvenile had some problems. I think they're working through that, but generally I think the other thing we got to do is we have to plan for fall and winter. Fall and winter, this thing could come back huge. And we really need to be prepared. And this is not just us, this is state and federal folks too. If you were on the phone call with our, which Martha was, with our caucus, they, you know, they're learning a lot too. And they're down in Salem going to be fighting for some of the things that Martha mentioned, which is about the folks getting out of hospitals that don't have a place to go. And we talked a little bit about that. Or the homeless people who are at risk. They're working down in Salem to see if we can resolve some of those things. Also, community corrections is not going to be funded. We're going to be way short this year, and I know that the transition center will probably be closed, at least temporarily. So that's too bad. It's working really well, but you know, we can't backfill all these things. But I think that Gary, I just want to thank Gary and Dancy and Stephen and you guys for all the great work you're doing and trying to get you all the information. I apologize if any of you feel left out, but I am just buried in information I feel left out because there's just so much of it. So thank you guys very much. Gary, did you want to add something? No.
Just, your leadership and the leadership of our board. Thank you.
Anyway, anybody else? Nope, it looks like we can call it a day. Thank you all very much.